Hey guys, tonight we're heading deep into the harvest fields of ancient Greece, where torchlight flickers across wheat stalks like fireflies caught mid-laughter, and Demeter's heavy footsteps rustle through the grain like distant thunder. You're barefoot, of course, because it's a sacred rite, and you can already feel the cracked earth under your soles cooling with the dusk. This is the part of the night when nothing bad has happened yet. The sky is ink blue, dotted with stars that look like poppy seeds scattered across a priestess's apron. You're holding a woven basket filled with barley husks, and the woman next to you, eyes rimmed with ash, voice soft as smoke, just whispered that tonight you'll witness something old, something holy. It's peaceful. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Midnight in Montreal, dawn in Singapore. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel stretches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge behind Demeter, the goddess of harvest herself, bare-armed, solemn, wearing a linen shift that smells faintly of olive oil and rain-soaked soil. You're walking toward a bonfire that's been burning since sundown. It sits at the center of a threshing floor carved into the hill, smoke curling upward like a sleepy serpent. The fire is surrounded by bundles of wheat, dry figs, coils of grapevine, and yes, those odd little fungi in the woven trays no one talks about. You're not sure why no one's talking about them. But you notice how Demeter's eyes narrow when a young priest places a small brown mushroom near the grain. She says nothing, just watches, her hands fold tightly, knuckles pale. Later that night, as the chants rise and the offerings begin, you notice something off. The smoke coming off the mushroom isn't like the others, it curls darker, heavier, like it's trying to spell something out midair. The priest who placed it there, he starts laughing, not joyfully, just laughing at nothing, to no one. One woman starts crying, another throws off her veil. A goat trots into the circle and collapses, either asleep or deceased. No one can agree. Demeter, unimpressed, steps forward and douses the mushroom with wine. The flame hisses. She mutters something in a language that sounds older than stone. The wind stills, and just like that, the laughter dies. You blink and realize everyone's looking at her. She nods once. The rite continues, but the mushroom tray, gone. This is the last peaceful harvest for a long time. You ask around quietly, over jugs of barley beer and crusts of sour bread, what happened? The elders shake their heads. One says something about the Mycenae incident. Another mutters, never again, and tears a mushroom embroidery off his tunic like it burned him. A curious boy, probably too young to know better, tells you that mushrooms used to be part of the sacred feasts. Before Demeter got all serious, he whispers, before Eleusis started keeping scrolls locked underground, you consider that. You look at the goddess. You look at your own hands, dusty from wheat and worry. Something's shifted. Fun fact. Ancient Greeks actually did have mysterious rites tied to agriculture, especially in Eleusis. Historians still argue whether the Eleusinian mysteries involved a psychoactive potion called kykeon, a mix of barley, mint, basai, and possibly something a little more fungal. The thing is, nobody wrote those recipes down, not clearly. Either they were too sacred or too sketchy. Some think the mushrooms snuck into the rites by accident, like a moldy loaf no one threw out fast enough. Others believe they were once celebrated until something went wrong. A bad trip in the sacred fields. Maybe a harvest gone sideways. You fall asleep later on a bed of straw under the stars. Demeter stays by the fire, silent, still barefoot. The mushroom that caused the priest to laugh now lies buried beneath a stone. No words carved, just the smell of ash and fennel clinging to the air like a warning. The sacred harvest has changed. You don't know how yet, but you know this. The mushrooms are no longer welcome. And tomorrow, when the sun rises over the grain, the fields won't feel quite so peaceful anymore. You wake to sunlight nudging through the barley stalks, soft and gold like honey left out too long. Your back aches from sleeping on bundled straw, but the scent of warm figs and ash still clings to your skin. Somewhere behind you, a lyre plucks a sleepy melody, a little too cheerful for what happened last night. The mushroom, Remember? The laughing priest, the wine-sizzling flame, the quiet fury in Demeter's eyes. Today, the fields are bustling with cleanup, but there's a strange tension. The kind you feel when something sacred has gone slightly sour, like a loaf left to rise too long in a warm kitchen. No one talks about it, not directly, but when a young girl drops a basket and a mushroom rolls out onto the threshing floor, time freezes. Demeter is across the yard, arranging bundles of grain with the steadiness of someone pretending not to watch. The moment that mushroom hits the dirt, her head turns. You expect a shout. Instead, she walks, slowly, quietly. She lifts the mushroom between two fingers like it's a piece of something shameful, holds it up to the light, and then, without ceremony, tosses it into the sacred fire pit still smoldering from last night. It gives off a dull hiss, then silence. This time, there's no laughter, just the rustling of robes and one muttered apology. You ask an old cook about it over lunch, olive paste, barley cakes, and cucumbers sliced too thick. She leans in, eyes darting left and right. There was a sacrifice once, she says, in Eleusis, meant to honor Demeter during the grain feast. Everything was fine until someone brought a spiced broth. You nod. With mushrooms. She nods slowly. With mushrooms. Apparently, the broth was supposed to be symbolic, earthy, deep. The priest who drank it began weeping and praising the harvest gods in Sanskrit, which was odd. Considering no one taught Sanskrit in Eleusis, he also tried to baptize a stone and kiss a fig tree. Demeter didn't stay to watch. She left midway through the ceremony, dragging a torch behind her and muttering about corruption in the soil. Later, the whole fire pit had to be reconsecrated. The sacred goat had indigestion for 3 days, and the priest, well, he never got his memory back. Though he did compose several sonnets about barley. You bite into your barley cake, chewing slowly. Mushrooms, the cook says, change people. Not like wine, which is predictable and friendly until it's not. Mushrooms are wild. They sneak in, they rewrite things. Grain, she whispers, is stable. Mushrooms are suspicious. That night, during a smaller ritual, just a simple wheat offering and some singing. You're allowed to carry a platter of sacred bread to the altar. You do it carefully, reverently, but you notice someone has added a new loaf. It's darker than the others and smells slightly foresty. You don't say anything. But when the fire is lit and the loaves are tossed into the flames, a gust of wind rips through the circle, blowing robes and knocking over an oil jug. No one gets hurt, but Demeter's face is stone. She picks up the fallen loaf, breaks it open, and reveals mushroom bits, sliced, sautéed, hidden like secrets between wheat and honey. She drops it. There's a long pause. Then, for the first time in decades, she speaks a full sentence during a rite. The harvest is not a joke. You think you hear thunder though the sky is clear. Fun fact, ancient Greek sacrifice often involved bread, wine, and animal offerings, but many minor rites included special loaves spiced with herbs, onions, and sometimes wild mushrooms. Whether intentionally psychoactive or not is still debated. Historians argue whether early Eleusinian rites flirted with altered states, or whether later accounts exaggerated the magical nature of ingredients to make the past seem more mysterious. Either way, Demeter's not having it. After the fire is safely put out and the bread ashes scattered, a new decree is whispered among the priests. No mushrooms in offerings, on loaves, or near sacred fire. Not even decorative ones carved from clay. One artist is asked to remove a mushroom from a fresco he's been painting since spring. He just sighs and paints over it with grapes. You go to bed uneasy, the smell of smoke still lingering in your tunic. Somewhere in the distance, a musician plucks a minor key, and in your sleep, you dream of forests, of mushrooms growing out of marble altars, of barley turning into ash. You wake tangled in your linen wrap, heart still thumping from a dream where barley stalks whispered your name in Demeter's voice. The air is heavier today, as if the fields are holding their breaths. Somewhere nearby, bees hum with the kind of nervous purpose that only happens when gods are paying attention. You wander away from the threshing yard, feet crunching over dry earth, toward the edge of the woods where the sacred grain fields meet something older, darker, and altogether less cultivated. The trees here hang low, like they're trying to keep secrets. This is where the mushrooms come from. No one admits it, of course, but there's a path, a narrow one, and you follow it. There's a bend in the trail where sunlight filters down in speckled patches, dappling moss and mushrooms alike red-capped, yellow-flecked, bulbous, curling, some shaped like ears, others like spilled ink. You crouch to look closer, and you swear one is breathing. Before you can touch it, a voice behind you says, "Don't." You turn. It's not Demeter. It's a woman in robes darker than plum, her hair tangled with laurel and dirt. She smells like cave walls and warm honey gone bad. They belong to him, she says, pointing downward. You know, him. She doesn't have to say the name. Hades. Apparently, mushrooms are his little trick. Not seeds from Demeter's garden, but fungi that bubble up from the damp bellies of the underworld fed on rot and memory. You eat one. The woman says, and you don't come back the same. You ask if that's what happened to the priest at Eleusis. She shrugs. Could be. Could have just had a bad batch. Modern scholars still puzzle over the link between ancient psychotropics and Greek spiritual rites. Some theorize that mycological ingredients snuck into religious ceremonies through cross-cultural contact, perhaps Persian, Thracian, or even older pre-Hellenic traditions. Others believe the association with the underworld is purely symbolic. Mushrooms grow in the dark, after all, and what's more mysterious than something rising from decay? But back then, to believers, mushrooms were neither food nor plant. They were messages, maybe even traps. The woman who might be a priestess or a prophetess, or just a very persuasive forager warns you that Demeter's anger isn't just about flavor, it's a turf war. She grins. Fungus versus grain. Chaos versus control. Hades versus harvest. And you're apparently stuck in the middle. Congratulations. You ask her what to do. She says, don't eat anything that doesn't grow under sun. You walk back slowly, glancing over your shoulder every few steps. The mushrooms seem closer now, like they crept toward you when you weren't looking. Back at the village, you find Demeter sitting by the grain silo, inspecting bundles like a general before a siege. She sees you, nods once, and returns to her task. There's no warmth in it, but also no fire. Later that night, during the meal, you notice a new dish being passed around. A thick stew, dark and steaming. One of the children asks, does it have mushrooms? Everyone freezes. Demeter lifts her head. The cook, trembling, replies, just lentils. Goddess. Demeter doesn't blink. Then feed it to the pig first. You eat lentils that night. Dry, overboiled, but safe. Fun fact. In ancient Greek household rituals, food testers were often animals' pigs, dogs. Even birds used to ensure sacred meals were free of toxins or, worse, unclean ingredients. The idea that an animal's death could warn humans feels grim, but also oddly practical. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or mostly dramatized by later playwrights looking for tension. You spend that night indoors, near the hearth. Every creak in the rafters sounds like spores settling in. You wonder, did mushrooms sneak in? Or were they invited? And what happens if Hades ever comes asking for his harvest back? You wake to singing, but not the usual sort. This isn't the melodicum of threshing women or the reed flute rhythm of barley prayers. It's disjointed, out of tune. A rising and falling nonsense chant coming from a tiny hilltop village just beyond the olive grove. You hike up with a crust of a morning bread in your hand, drawn by curiosity or maybe just the promise of weirdness. What you find isn't comforting. The villagers are dancing. At least, you think they're dancing. A dozen or so people are spinning in circles around a small shrine to Demeter, arms limp, feet bare and muddy, their mouths repeating syllables that make less and less sense the longer you listen. You watch one woman try to kneel and miss the ground entirely. She lies there giggling into the dirt. A priestess nearby is trying to restore order, sloshing a bowl of water around and yelling something about bread gone wrong. Then you spot it. A broken offering loaf, abandoned by the shrine. It's dotted with something chewy looking, something that looks an awful lot like last night's mushrooms from the forest edge. And Demeter. She arrives not on foot, but in a wind, a blast of warm air and falling olive leaves. Her sandals thud against the ground. Her gaze sweeps the scene once, twice, and then she speaks just 4 words. Who baked the bread? A man steps forward. He's chewing something. That's when you know it's over for him. Later, after the wind dies down and the villagers have either sobered or slept, Demeter calls a private gathering. You're invited, though no one tells you why. You sit under a fig tree, trying not to breathe too loudly. Demeter paces slowly, like someone deciding whether a field should be harvested or burned. She speaks softly but sharply. Grain is order. Mushrooms are chaos. You want to ask if that's a metaphor? You don't. She continues. Bread is sacred because it grows tall, from seed to stalk, upright in the sun. But mushrooms come from darkness, from rot. They do not rise. They erupt. There's murmuring. One of the younger priests, bold or perhaps just tired, raises a hand. But isn't chaos part of nature too? Demeter stops pacing. The silence stretches so long it begins to taste metallic. Then she nods, just once. Yes, she says, but not this nature. Not in my fields. And just like that, the debate is over. Fun fact. In Greek agricultural symbology, the vertical growth of crops like wheat and barley represented cosmic order, literally reaching toward Olympus. In contrast, mushrooms popping up overnight, fed on decay, were often tied to chthonic forces. Historians still argue whether this dichotomy was theological or simply poetic, but Demeter definitely had opinions. That night, the villagers are ordered to burn their ovens, not forever, just for a day, a ritual cleansing. Smoke rises like incense, curling through the olive branches and carrying the smell of ash and thyme. You help stack broken bread into the fire, wondering if the mushrooms were really the cause, or just an excuse. Then again, a goat just tried to climb a tree, so maybe it was the bread. As the flames rise, Demeter stands beside you, eyes on the embers. No more surprises. She murmurs, "Not in my harvest." You nod, but deep down, you know surprises don't need permission, especially the ones that grow underground. The road to Delphi is long, sun-split, and covered in donkey droppings. You're walking it anyway because someone in the village whispered that the oracles have been seeing colors they can't explain. Not metaphorical visions, actual colors. New ones. Green-orange, violet-black, shades with names that melt if you say them aloud. Naturally, that got your attention. You reach the sacred slopes just before dusk. The temple of Apollo looms like a half-unwrapped fig, grand, but falling apart in places. Pigeons roost where gods once stood. Pilgrims shuffle past you in faded cloaks, muttering hopes into the dust. And there she is, the Pythia. She's sitting cross-legged, eyes half-closed, face painted with soot and crushed laurel. Her attendants offer barley cakes, coins, and yup, an odd little bowl of mushroom-laced wine. You know the smell now. Earthy, sweet, untrustworthy. You lean closer. The Pythia giggles, sips again, and then slurs. Your socks have secrets. No one around her is wearing socks. Someone murmurs that she predicted a war between trees and bees last week. Another says she convinced a Spartan general to marry his horse. The oracles, it seems, have been off lately. You scan the room. The mushrooms aren't new here. Delphi's rites were always laced with ecstatic breath and strange smoke. But the mixtures changed. You overhear an old temple scribe whisper about a new supplier from Thessaly, a region famous for witches, goat-based cosmetics, and risky fermentation techniques. Historians still argue whether the Pythia's trance came from natural gases beneath the temple or substances brewed into the sacred wine. Some texts hint at ergot, a mold on grain. Others describe a ritual involving dried mushroom caps crushed into grape must. Either way, altered states weren't a glitch. They were part of the system. But Demeter isn't impressed. Word reaches Delphi by the third day. She doesn't arrive in person this time, it's a letter, delivered via crow. The parchment smells faintly of toasted wheat and disapproval. 3 lines. Bread is vision enough. Spores obscure the truth. Stop feeding lies to fire. The head priest reads it aloud, then sighs. You'd think this might spark some theological debate. Instead, the attendants quietly clear the mushrooms from the wine, replacing them with rosemary sprigs. The Pythia sobers instantly. She looks around, like someone just turned the lights on. "What year is it?" she whispers. You leave soon after, passing a group of priests scraping symbols off a wall that, judging by the colors, were never meant to exist. That night, you camp under the stars, near a grove of whispering poplars. You roast chickpeas over a tired flame and sip lukewarm water. Boring, sure, but you don't hallucinate a chorus of talking badgers, so that's a win. Fun fact. Some ancient philosophers believe that too much divine inspiration called entheos, the root of enthusiasm, was dangerous if uncontrolled. The line between vision and madness, especially in temple rites, was thin as olive oil on marble. That's why rituals were structured, timed, and monitored. Usually, you lie on your back, staring at the stars. One looks like it's pulsing. You blink hard. Just a normal star. No mushrooms tonight, just barley. And maybe some rosemary. You were promised a restful detour through a satyr village. You were lied to. The place looks normal at first. Vine-draped cottages, dusty cobblestone paths, the usual scent of wet goat, but something's off. There's music playing, but it sounds like a pan flute melting in the sun. And everyone is giggling. You catch sight of a satyr stumbling out of a wine cellar with purple stains on his knees and a garland of truffles wrapped around his horns like a crown. He stops mid-stagger, bows to a turnip, and calls it Your Majesty. You're not surprised anymore, just tired. You make it to the village square, where a feast is underway, the table sagging with roasted chestnuts, honey-smeared bread, and towering pies puffed with what the cook claims are forest secrets. One pie jiggles when no one touches it. Another hisses. You are starting to suspect this isn't sanctioned by Olympus. Then Dionysus shows up, not in his usual polished form. Mind you, today he's barefoot, toga askew, and laughing like someone who's just remembered a punchline from 800 years ago. He plops down beside you, pops a mushroom-stuffed grape into his mouth, and offers you one with a wink. No, thank you, you mumble. He grins. Suit yourself, grain boy. The satyrs cheer. Someone jumps into a vat of fig syrup. A goat tries to play the flute. Across the table, a priestess of Demeter watches with arms crossed and a facial expression usually reserved for overcooked porridge. She finally stands, points at the mushroom pie, and shouts, "This is why no one trusts autumn anymore." It's the second time in as many weeks you've seen a goddess rage quit a feast. Fun fact, satyrs in Greek mythology were associated with unrestrained indulgence wine, food, music, and yes, hallucinogens. They were followers of Dionysus, often portrayed as symbols of chaos and carnal joy. Scholars still debate whether satyrs were intended as comic relief, cautionary tales, or both. But tonight, they're just terrible hosts. Demeter storms out, barefoot again. You follow mostly because someone's juggling flaming cheese and the odds of survival have dropped sharply. You catch up with her outside the village. She's muttering in ancient syllables, each one heavy with barley-scented disappointment. You'd think by now they'd learn, she says, more to herself than to you. Mushrooms don't belong in sacred kitchens. They belong in wet logs and questionable poetry. You nod solemnly. One of your sandals is sticky from the pie. Back in the satyr village, someone yells. The donkey's giving speeches again, and the cheers erupt. Demeter sighs so hard it startles a nearby owl. She turns to you, lowering her voice. Tell them this. Tell everyone the harvest is not a carnival. It is a covenant. And just like that, the moon rises over the path home. The laughter fades behind you. The forest hushes itself. As you walk, a soft drizzle begins just enough to make the earth smell like rain and regret. You think about that satyr who tried to woo a pine cone, and how, underneath all the laughter, there's a war brewing. Grain versus fungus, order versus eruption, and at the center of it all, a goddess with dirty feet and no patience for pies that hiss. You arrive at the temple just in time for a dinner that was supposed to be divine. Literally, 5 goddesses, 1 table, countless expectations. You've been roped into kitchen duty chopping figs, straining olive paste, fanning the fire with a reed mat that keeps catching smoke in your eye. The head cook tells you, keep it simple. No garlic, no onions, no surprises. You nod. You absolutely do not mention the fact that someone snuck a truffle shaving into the oil this morning. You saw it. You said nothing. You're not proud of that. But in your defense, the truffle looked smug. The table is set beneath a pergola of grapevines. Bathed in soft torchlight, Hestia's already seated, sipping warm barley water with a satisfied sigh. Athena is late typical. Artemis arrives with 2 hunting dogs and a live rabbit, which she promises won't be a problem. Aphrodite doesn't walk in so much as drift, leaving the scent of myrrh and sarcasm in her wake. And then there's Demeter. She arrives with a fresh-baked barley loaf under one arm and a look that could wither granite. She places the loaf gently in the center of the table, gives a firm nod, and sits. It starts well enough. Quiet pleasantries, warm olives, even a brief, polite laugh when Artemis accidentally drops a fig into her sandal. Then someone bites into the dipping oil. It's Athena. She pauses, chews again, frowns. What's that taste? She asks, glancing at the cook. The cook freezes. You freeze. Even the dogs freeze. Aphrodite takes a bite too. It's earthy. Interesting. Is it time? Demeter stands, walks to the oil bowl, lifts it to her nose, sniffs once, twice. Then she pours it out onto the ground. Truffle, she says flatly. Fungus. The table goes silent. Hestia blinks. Artemis leans back. Aphrodite raises both eyebrows. Athena dabs her mouth with a napkin so precisely, you think she might throw it like a dart. Then Demeter does something unexpected. She sits back down, smooths her robe, and declares, "This dinner is over." The olive dish cracks from the tension. Fun fact: truffles were known in the ancient Mediterranean world, though not as widely prized as today. Some regions consider them delicacies. Others saw them as dangerous oddities. Historians still argue whether they were reserved for certain classes or rituals, or whether their unpredictable nature made them taboo for religious use. The other goddesses don't argue. Not really. But the mood shifts. Aphrodite dips bread into the remains of the oil anyway, muttering, "Well, I like earthy." Athena rolls her eyes and begins listing the chemical compounds in truffles that might cause mild behavioral inconsistency. Hestia just sighs and starts packing leftovers in beeswax cloth. Artemis, chewing on a celery stalk, asks, "Can we at least eat the rabbit?" Demeter doesn't reply. She's already walking away, her bare feet leaving tiny prints in the spilled oil. You clean up in silence, the truffle having vanished mysteriously, probably eaten by one of Artemis's dogs, who now looks suspiciously euphoric. As you carry the barley loaf back to the storage room, you notice a bite has been taken from it. You didn't do it. You swear you didn't, but someone did. And if Demeter finds out, you may not survive the next meal shift. The barley purge begins at dawn. You don't get a formal announcement, just the smell of smoke and the unmistakable sound of Demeter smashing ceramic storage jars with the kind of righteous fury usually reserved for enemy armies or overcooked lentils. By the time you stumble out of bed, the entire central granary is in chaos. High-ranking priestesses are unbinding loaves to inspect the dough, lifting each one to the light like a scroll of forbidden poetry. Workers tip barrels of aged grain into pits, lighting them with oil-soaked reeds. The sky darkens with birds circling. Confused by the scent of toasted wheat and divine wrath, you're handed a wooden paddle and told, if it's soft, break it. If it smells sweet, burn it. Welcome to the audit. It starts with the Eleusinian stockpiles, then the lesser temples, then the traveling vendors who peddle blessed barley cakes along the sacred way. One man claims his wares are Demeter approved until she arrives in person, sniffs his basket, and strikes him down with a single glance. He faints, probably for the best. You don't blame her. A new scroll has surfaced, anonymous. Of course, a recipe for something called silomaza, a sacred barley mash laced with fermented honey and powdered mushroom. No one knows who wrote it. Some blame Thessalian witches. Others whisper about Dionysian infiltrators. A few point to a suspiciously talented baker in Corinth who just has a knack for glow-in-the-dark crusts. You sneak a glance at the scroll while pretending to carry firewood. It's illustrated, badly, but the final step includes a phrase that sticks with you. Bake until the dream walks out. That afternoon, Demeter orders the destruction of 5 entire fields. Contaminated, she says, complicit. You ask what that means, and a priest tells you the spores are in the wind now, invisible, persistent. Fungus remembers, he mutters. It maps us. You nod, trying to look serious while also deeply considering retirement. Fun fact, in real history, grain, ergo a fungal parasite on rye and barley, was known to cause hallucinations, convulsions, and sometimes mass hysteria. Historians still debate whether outbreaks of ergotism influenced spiritual practices or village panics. Demeter wouldn't need a science to justify her rage. She had myth. She had fields that whispered back. The final straw comes when a sacrificial ox, normally docile, refuses to kneel before the altar. Instead, it circles twice, mooing the melody of a known Dionysian hymn. No one can explain it. One priest claims the ox was fed enhanced feed. Another faints before he can elaborate. Demeter, unsmiling, places her hand on the ox's forehead. It kneels, then promptly falls asleep. Later, while helping to cleanse the feeding troughs, you find a satchel tied with ivy vines. Inside, dried mushrooms, dyed red, and sealed in wax. You bury them under the threshing floor, just in case. That night, Demeter addresses the grain keepers. No spores, she says, no truffles, no uncertain dough. From this moment on, grain shall be pure. The fire crackles beside her, and if it is not, she adds, voice low and sharp, then neither shall the land be. You sleep with one eye open, wrapped in a blanket that still smells faintly of smoke and rosemary. In your dream, the fields are clean, silent, and utterly, impossibly still. You wake up in a vineyard where things are somehow even less under control. You weren't planning to be here. But the last messenger from Eleusis vanished after mentioning wine with legs and a whisper. So Demeter sent you. That's your new job title now. Reluctant envoy to unpredictable gods. The vineyard belongs to Dionysus. Of course it does. The place is sprawling, overgrown, and buzzing with activity that shouldn't technically be happening at this hour unless you believe in breakfast banquets. You arrive just in time to see a young satyr balance a wine jug on his head while debating a philosopher about whether laughter counts as harvest. In the center of it all sits Dionysus, lounging in a robe of crushed grapes and silk, drinking from a goblet the size of your torso. You're late, he says, not even glancing up. The argument has already begun. You're confused. Argument. Then you see them, Demeter and Dionysus, seated across from each other at a marble table stained with grape juice and flour. Between them is a pile of bread loaves, wine jars, and what looks like a basket of mushrooms painted gold. Demeter speaks first. Your grapes rot, mine ripen. Why must you drag decay into the harvest? Dionysus waves a hand lazily. Rot is just ripening in reverse. Besides, your wheat makes people full. My wine makes them feel. She glares. My wheat feeds nations. He smirks. My wine starts them. The satyrs cheer. A dryad throws her arms around a cypress in dramatic support. You sit down quietly and hope no one notices your panic. Demeter points to the mushroom basket. These are not symbols. They're saboteurs. Dionysus laughs. They're fun. That's when it clicks. This isn't about mushrooms or bread or even sacred rites. It's about control. Demeter represents structure, furrowed rows of grain, measured harvests, ritualized feasts. Dionysus, he's chaos with good lighting, wild roots, fermented thoughts, improvisational ecstasy, and the mushrooms. They're the territory in between. Fun fact. In ancient Greece, Dionysian cults were known for ecstatic rituals involving wine, music, dance, and possibly entheogenic substances including mushrooms. Meanwhile, Demeter's Eleusinian rites were secretive, sober, and structured. Scholars still debate whether the tension between these two deities reflects deeper philosophical divides between restraint and release, mind and body, permanence and impermanence. Back at the vineyard, Dionysus lifts a mushroom from the basket and balances it on a loaf. Just imagine, he says, what happens when your sacred bread learns how to dream. Demeter stands. My bread doesn't need to dream. It feeds, it endures. Then, without warning, she slaps the loaf off the table. It lands in the dirt with a soft puff of flour. Everyone goes silent. You hold your breath. Dionysus stares down at the fallen bread, then up at Demeter. His smile fades, just slightly. Very well, he says. He gestures, and the satyrs begin clearing the table wine, mushrooms, the laughing bread roll that's somehow giggling even after being stepped on. You don't ask. As Demeter walks away, she says over her shoulder, next harvest festival, keep your vines out of my ovens. Dionysus sips his wine. No promises. That night, you lie in a wine-soaked guest cot made from grapevines and regret you're pretty sure something is growing in your pillow. You whisper a barley prayer just in case, but deep down, you're starting to wonder if Dionysus had a point. Dreaming bread Doesn't sound entirely terrible. You return to Eleusis just in time for the pilgrim season. Thousands are arriving on foot, by cart, by stubborn donkey, all seeking the blessings of Demeter through sacred rites, solemn chants, and hopefully, a small loaf of bread that won't cause them to speak backwards for 3 days. You're assigned to the pilgrim queue. Your job, sniff the loaves. That's not a joke. One by one, you open linen bundles, inspect offerings, and lean in like some sacred sommelier of baked goods. If it smells like grain, mint, or olive oil, you nod. If it smells earthy, woody, or just a little too mysterious, you raise the red ribbon. By mid-morning, you've flagged 3 funny loaves, 2 spice cakes that turned out to be legal but deeply unfortunate, and 1 pilgrim who accidentally brought a roasted squash filled with fermented spores. He said it was a family recipe. You said it was a biohazard. Then it happens. A woman arrives with a beautiful round loaf, carved barley stalks on the crust, just the right crackle when she breaks it open. But you see it tiny, dark green flecks just below the surface. You ask, "What's this?" She smiles. "Oh, it's the spicy loaf from Corinth. It's all the rage." Pilgrims say it helps them feel closer. Closer to what? You don't ask. You already know. You flag the loaf. 2 guards escort her gently to the side. She looks disappointed but unsurprised. Then, quietly, the rumors begin. People whisper about how those loaves, yes, the spicy ones, help you see the wheat's soul, that they allow deeper visions of Demeter, that they were part of the original mysteries before things got too controlled. Before the goddess went dry, it spreads faster than barley in spring. By dusk, 15 more pilgrims show up with spicy loaves. Some hide them in hollow gourds. Others claim it's medicinal. One just shrugs and says it was on sale. You bring the matter to the high priestess, who groans into her shawl and mumbles, "We should have banned cinnamon too." That night, Demeter addresses the entire sanctuary. She speaks softly, but with the gravity of someone who's seen entire civilizations forget how to store grain properly. These are not visions, she says. They are tricks, not sacred insight, but borrowed chaos. She pauses. If you cannot meet me in clarity, then you do not meet me at all. The crowd shifts. Some nod. Some look away. A few quietly bite their loaves in defiance. You sleep uneasily. Fun fact. The Eleusinian mysteries were among the most secretive religious rites in antiquity. Participants drank a ritual beverage called kykeon, thought to be a mix of barley, mint, and possibly psychotropic additives. Historians still argue whether the brew was symbolic or actively mind-altering. The spicy loaf. That's your century's problem. You wake before dawn and check the oven house. The bakery is locked, except for 1 warm tray sitting on the windowsill. You lift the cloth. They're ordinary barley rolls, pure, clean, silent, and still, for a moment, you hesitate. You wonder what it would be like if the bread could dream. You're halfway through hauling a cart of grain when the screaming starts. It's not human. Not exactly. You sprint to the sacred barn, heart pounding, and burst through the doors, expecting wild dogs or another satyr prank gone fungal. But it's worse. Far worse. It's the cow. Specifically, the cow Demeter's ceremonial oxen, the one blessed during solstice, whose gentle lowing opens every harvest rite, the one children paint with olive oil and wreaths, the one whose moo is supposed to be a divine signal of fertility and favor. And today, she won't moo. She just stands there, eyes wide, hooves locked, neck muscles trembling. A dozen handlers gather around, coaxing her with fig leaves, warm water, even a flute solo not helpful. Nothing. Demeter arrives moments later. One look at her face tells you this is not a small problem. She approaches slowly, lays a hand on the cow's forehead, and waits. Silence. Then the cow opens her mouth, and out comes a strange, rasping chirp. Like a cicada with stage fright. You hear a collective gasp. One of the acolytes starts crying. Someone faints and lands directly into a basket of barley flour. Demeter steps back. "Who fed her?" she asks. Nobody answers. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. Her silence grows louder by the second, until one young stable hand blurts, "I gave her a mash ball." Just scraps. Just leftovers from the pilgrims. You know what that means? You don't even have to ask. They check the feed trough. A half-chewed spicy loaf rests at the bottom. Demeter closes her eyes. Take her to the quiet field. she says. Let her remember the grass. They wheel the cow away in a sacred cart, garlands removed. You swear she gives you a haunted look on the way out. Fun fact: ancient Greeks held animals, especially cows and oxen, as vital ritual participants. Some even believed they could act as oracles. There are recorded myths of mute or misbehaving sacrificial animals being interpreted as bad omens. Historians still debate whether these events were symbolic, staged, or simply real barnyard mysteries elevated by theology. Back in the barn, Demeter takes a seat on a stool once used to churn ritual butter. She doesn't speak for a long time. Then she looks at you. I don't ban things lightly, she says, but fungus doesn't understand boundaries. You try to ask, gently, what if some of the pilgrims mean well? Demeter gives a small, sad smile. So do floods. So do fires. You don't argue. That night, no music plays. The fields stay dark. The cow's absence is loud in its own way. You kneel by the altar, hoping the silence doesn't mean Demeter's presence is gone. You hope she's just thinking. But in the distance, you swear you hear a faint, croaky moo, as if the cow, in some forgotten corner of the earth, is trying to speak again. The recipe scrolls are discovered by accident. You're chasing a runaway olive jar. Don't ask when it rolls under an abandoned oven behind the Thessalian grain kitchen. The oven's cracked, half buried in dried thyme stems and soot. The sort of place only spiders and secrets still visit. You bend down to grab the jar and notice something wedged between two fire-blackened bricks. A scroll. You pull it free slowly. The parchment is brittle and warm, like an old palm pressed against your fingers. Someone wrapped it in a beeswax cloth scented faintly with smoke and something spicier. You know that smell now? It's the quiet warning scent of mushrooms. Against your better judgment, you open it. The handwriting is rushed, uneven, but legible. The first line reads, "For communion with the deeper harvest, do not bake on a full moon." Well, that's promising. It continues, step by careful step. A barley base, crushed fig for sweetness, wild mint, dried mushroom powder measured with something called a goddess's pinch. And finally, a line scrawled vertically down the margin. Sing while mixing. The loaf hears better that way. You freeze. It's not a joke. It's not some lost peasant recipe. It's a rite. You know enough of Demeter's doctrine to recognize a counterfeit when you see one. But this is something in between, half heresy, half memory. You tuck the scroll into your tunic and leave the oven slowly, heart thudding like hooves on a stone floor. Later that night, you show it to the high priestess. She goes pale, then asks you only one question. Who else has seen this? You shake your head. No one. She nods and locks the scroll inside a bronze chest, hidden behind jars of salted goat cheese. Then she looks you dead in the eye and says, "Forget it." That's when you know it's real. Fun fact: Thessaly was considered a region of witches in the ancient world, known for love potions, necromancy, and cloud charming. Yes, literally controlling the weather with incantations. Some surviving recipes from that region blur the line between culinary and magical, especially when mushrooms are involved. Historians still argue whether these recipes were meant for medicine, ritual, or mischief. The next morning, you're sent to clean the old bread ovens. Alone, you sweep ashes that smell like forgotten songs. You scrape moss from the bricks. And as the light hits just right, you notice symbols etched into the inside of the stone arch, barely visible. Just shadows and soot. A spiral, a mushroom cap, and a barley stalk, curled inward, as if listening. They weren't baking for taste. They were baking for visions, for communion. You sit there for a while, hands black with soot, wondering how many loaves have carried something more than hunger, and whether Demeter was trying to protect the harvest or silence it. That night, you dream of bread rising by itself. It sings your name twice. Athena shows up with a scroll and a sour expression. She doesn't usually get involved in culinary drama. Her temples are about marble, geometry, and politely aggressive owl statues. But this morning, she storms into the Eleusinian sanctuary in full armor. Yes, even the sandals with the bronze toes, and demands a hearing. Demeter barely looks up from her bundle of blessed barley. Athena slams the scroll onto the altar with the fury of someone who's just been served a truffle-stuffed olive at a tactical briefing. "This is getting out of hand," she says, crossing her arms. "I was offered psychedelic flatbread in Corinth last week. By a priest, Demeter raises one eyebrow. Flatbread, she says flatly, gluten-free. Athena mutters, irrelevant. The point is, the rituals are spreading. They're calling it enlightenment. They're quoting Hades like he's a nutritionist. You shift uncomfortably. You've heard some of those quotes? One started with, if the grain dies, the mind blooms, and ended with a mushroom tea that made a scribe try to marry a sundial. Athena unrolls the scroll. It's a list of names, towns, loaves, a traveling festival called Fungalia. Someone's been marketing the spicy bread as mind bread of the goddess. Even worse, they're spelling Demeter's name with a Y. Demeter bread. Feed your inner root. Demeter doesn't flinch, but her knuckles tighten on the barley stalks. Athena takes a breath, softens a little. Look, I admire restraint. Truly, love a good rule. But this is spreading like moss on a damp shield. You need to say something. Loudly, officially, Demeter finally stands. I already have. People need logic, not riddles. Athena presses a decree. An explanation? Something besides torch glares and symbolic foot stomping. Demeter considers this, then gestures to a scribe. Summon the bakers, she says, the ones with ovens and opinions. That afternoon, in the sun-dappled courtyard, Demeter gathers a semicircle of bakers, scribes, and one owl who refuses to leave Athena's shoulder. She lifts a pure barley loaf with both hands. This, she says, is memory made edible. It comes from the sky, the soil, the patience of planting. She drops it. Then she lifts another loaf, one with swirl marks, two soft edges, and a suspicious aroma. This, she says, is a story rewritten with borrowed ink. It does not belong to the harvest. She doesn't drop it. She places it gently onto a cloth, wraps it, and hands it to the owl. Take that, she says, to Hades. The owl looks offended but flies off. Fun fact. Ancient Greek owls were associated with Athena, by extension, wisdom, logic, and often bureaucracy. In myth, owls sometimes served as messengers, omens, or passive judges in disputes. Historians still debate whether the owl-as symbol began in Athens or was adapted from older Mediterranean traditions. As the sun lowers, Athena approaches you privately. She's right. You know, the bread is memory. You nod, wiping your hands on your robe. But memory has holes. Athena gives a thin smile. That's why I use scrolls. You both watch as Demeter kneels by the hearth, arranging plain loaves in a circle like puzzle pieces she's not quite finished solving. The owl returns at dusk. Its beak is empty, but one feather on its wing is painted gold. You didn't expect to be called as a witness at the trial of the truffle priest. Frankly, you thought that whole mushroom scandal would die quietly, like mold under a sunbeam. But no, today you find yourself in the Temple of Sacred Provisions, sitting uncomfortably on a stone bench, while a full tribunal gathers to decide whether a Corinthian priest named Eleusis should be exiled for intentional contamination of sacramental dough. The charges: 3 counts of heretical baking, 1 loaf with wild truffles, 1 spiced with fermented spores, and 1 unconfirmed vision. Crust allegedly responsible for a 3-day marriage between a shepherd and his own shadow. You sigh and straighten your robe. This is going to be a long day. Demeter presides. Naturally, no judge's bench, just a stone platform covered in barley, her feet bare and unmoving. Athena sits beside her, quill in hand, recording every word with grim efficiency. Behind you, the audience murmurs with the kind of excitement usually reserved for olive oil auctions or chariot crashes. Lysicles looks smug. That's the first problem. He wears a robe dyed in mushroom ink. His cuffs are embroidered with stylized spores. He even smells faintly of thyme and damp curiosity. He starts with a bow. Too deep, too theatrical. I only wished, he says, to honor the old ways. Demeter's eyebrow lifts by less than a millimeter. It's more terrifying than thunder. You honored chaos, she replies. In my kitchen. He argues that ancient rituals embrace duality, that mushrooms represent the hidden fertility of the earth, the below to Demeter's above. He even quotes a suspiciously poetic line: where barley bows, fungus rises. A few in the crowd murmur. Someone coughs into their sleeve. Then you're called. You rise. Your task: describe the loaf you intercepted. The one hidden in a traveling altar box lined with saffron and sass. You do your best. It was soft. You begin, but not warm, fragrant, but in a way that made me rethink reality. The crust shimmered slightly, and when broken open, it giggled. Silence. Demeter's voice is calm. Did you eat it? You pause. No. You say honestly, but I wanted to. There it is. The real problem. The temptation. The story baked into the bread. Fun fact. There are records from ancient mystery cults of sacred temptation foods, items brought to the edge of ritual but never consumed. Believed to carry symbolic weight, some scholars believe these were metaphorical. Others think they were real and used to test spiritual discipline. The concept of forbidden flavor appears in more than one tablet fragment from Eleusis. Lysicles pounces, desire, he says, turning to the crowd, is not corruption, it is invitation. Athena mutters something under her breath. It sounds like someone gag him with a plain roll. Demeter rises. Her words are few. You invited temptation into bread. She steps down from her platform, barefoot barley crunching underfoot. You taught people to chew visions instead of waiting for them. She approaches Lysicles. He wilts slightly. And you flavored faith with mushrooms. He tries one last smile, but isn't that innovation? Demeter tilts her head. No, that's seasoning rebellion. A judgment is passed. Lysicles is stripped of his baker's robe, not exiled, but reassigned. He'll tend the dry grain bins in Thasos. No ovens, no yeast, just scoops and silence. He bows, slightly less smug this time. You're dismissed. Later, you find a small, round loaf on the tribunal altar. You unwrap it carefully. Inside, plain barley, nothing more. And still, it smells hopeful. The decree is hammered into the grainhouse wall just after sunrise, carved in clean, deep letters by a scribe whose hand did not tremble. Even when a chunk of limestone fell directly onto his sandal, the scribe kept working. The message, after all, had waited long enough. By order of Demeter, from this day forward, let no fungus be known in loaf or offering. The harvest is to remain pure, sun-raised, rooted in clarity. No spore shall enter the fire of the gods. It's not poetic, it's not flowery, but the people read it. And for once, they listen. Pilgrims leave their spicy loaves on stone steps, unsure what else to do. Bakers scrub their ovens with salt water and barley ash. The Eleusinian kitchen throws out an entire rack of fermented fig rolls just in case. You even see a group of satyrs quietly carrying a basket of mushrooms out to the forest. No music, no flute solos, just solemn nods and one whispered, "Sorry, little guys." Demeter doesn't gloat. She doesn't need to. She simply returns to the fields. You follow her because by now, following Demeter through a story of spiritual food drama has become your second nature. The wheat sways gently in the early wind. The grain feels alive, but in a familiar way, not like those mushroom-laced loaves that pulse slightly when no one touched them. Demeter kneels and touches the soil. This, she says, is the memory I want to leave behind. You watch her press a small handful of seeds into the earth. Nothing dramatic, no lightning, just quiet. But then she looks at you. There is a place, she murmurs, where chaos still belongs. In dreams, in shadow, even in laughter. She smiles a real smile, the first in a long while. But not here. You nod. Then she adds, softly, if one day the world forgets and fungus finds its way back into the dough. She pauses. Make sure they at least bake it slowly. You almost laugh. That night, the harvest fire glows warmer than it has in weeks. Simple bread is passed around barley, mint ompi, olive oil, baked under clean sky. No secrets in the crust, no visions in the crumb, just nourishment. And yet somehow it still tastes divine. Fun fact, many ancient rituals reinforced purity laws in food, not out of superstition, but to maintain cultural memory. Grain wasn't just food, it was proof that the world could be organized, grown, shared. Not everything that grows in darkness was feared, but many things were questioned. As the crowd drifts off to sleep beside the sacred fields, you find yourself looking back toward the woods. You think about the mushrooms, their strange wisdom, their strange timing, and you wonder not with fear, but with curiosity, what they're dreaming about now. The fields grow quiet, and your limbs grow heavy. You feel the weight of the day drift off your shoulders like flour dust off a baker's sleeve. The torches along the sacred road flicker, their flames softened by the hush of night. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl hoots less like a warning now, more like a lullaby. You're lying on woven blankets. Just beyond the grain circle, the earth beneath you still warm from the day's sun. Your breath moves in time with the breeze through the barley stalks, slow, gentle, rhythmic. There's no music tonight, no arguments between gods, just the steady hum of crickets, the distant splash of water on stones, and the hush of loaves cooling on the temple hearth. Even the stars above seem quieter, less like watchers, more like dots of memory stitched into the sky. You let yourself relax fully now. The scent of clean grain and faint mint curling around you like a second blanket. Your thoughts wander slowly, past mushroom pies and golden scrolls, past whispering cows and dancing satyrs, into the deep, rich silence of a story that's finished before flank wheat. For now, no more questions, no more visions, just rest. Breathe in, breathe out, sleep, knowing that the fields are clean. The bread is simple, and for tonight, at least, the world is exactly as it should be.